you to classes with me, just know that I will leave time at the end for questions. So please put them in the chat rather than unmuting yourself, and there will be plenty of time. So hopefully everybody sees one big screen that says the heart-brain connection and not multiple little screens, and we'll get started. Okay, so we're talking about, it seems like almost two very separate things, heart health and brain health, but so I want to make sure we understand kind of like what we're going for here, and then we'll bring them all together. So when people talk about heart health, they're usually talking about these metrics you see in front of you. This is from the American Heart Association. We're talking about our resting heart rate. This is our heart rate at rest. Our LDL, or some people call it your lousy cholesterol. And actually, this is a somewhat vague umbrella number because there's actually lots of different types of LDL. There's different particle sizes of LDL. So LDL isn't the one and only be all, but it's on every lipid panel you'll ever have, and it's a good kind of initial screening number for heart health. The LDL cholesterol is the type that is sticky and creates plaque. Then we have blood pressure, which is, of course, an indication of potentially hypertension risk. The more blood pressure we have, the slower our blood is moving to all of our different areas, which later we will talk about how that very much impacts your brain. If your brain is getting very slow delivery of blood and it's sticky in there, we now have pretty high risk of things like strokes, right? Waist circumference. This is looking at our body composition. And I love this one because it lists waist circumference and body mass index, whereas a lot of people will just talk about BMI, like your height to weight. Not as good of an indicator as our body composition. So sure, I might be overweight, but what if that overweight is all muscle? That's potentially not a risk of heart rate, of heart risk. So waist circumference is a really good indicator of our body composition rather than just our weight. And it tells us how much visceral fat is around the midsection, which is a risk for heart health. And then we have hemoglobin A1C, which is a measure of our 3-month average of blood sugar. So the you can prick your finger and get your blood sugar in the moment. Your A1C is the average of that number over a 3-month period, which is a much better indicator of what our blood sugars are looking like over time, which is our risk of, yes, diabetes. Most people think of A1C connected to diabetes, but it's a very good indicator of heart health because, again, if we have a blood that is thickened with sugar and we potentially have a little bit of hypertension, or maybe we have some LDL that's sticking, now we have a really slow, thick moving blood that is not only not getting to all of our different areas of the body and creating risk of heart attack, but it's also not getting to the brain where it needs to go very quickly. So the way I kind of think of it is, you remember those toys when we were little? They were like sticks that had water and glitter in it. You could sit it to one side and all the glitter would fall down, and you do it to the other side and all the glitter would fall down. Think of that as your blood with sugar and particles in it. The more glitter we shove in there, the slower that little thing would flow, right? And that means the slower our blood is flowing where it needs to go. That's overall heart health. When we talk about brain health, we don't have as many easy markers and metrics like we do for heart health. We're really looking at more symptomatic things. Of course, doctors can screen for stuff, but usually when we're just kind of thinking of our own brain health, we're thinking more symptomatically. So there are 4 areas or domains of cognitive capacity of brain health, of cognition, and that's memory, attention, executive function, and processing speed. So all 4 of these are kind of separate areas of how your brain functions. You might have a really amazing memory, but if you're not paying attention to where you set the keys down in the first place, you won't remember where you put them later. Even though it's not a memory problem, it's a paying attention problem. You might have really fantastic processing speed and be able to catch a ball that's thrown at you, but if you're not able to reason through why you should be catching a ball, like why it's a problem if the ball goes past you and through the window, that's your executive function. You might not know to reach out and grab the ball, even though it's not a processing speed thing, it's an executive function thing. So these are just the areas to kind of be aware of when we're thinking of brain health, and they can each dialed up or down. They do kind of work together and yet independently at the same time. And so when we're thinking about brain health, we're thinking about these symptoms of how's my memory, how's my attention, how's my executive function, how's my processing speed, which are a little bit easier to measure than some of the heart health ones. Heart health is unfortunately much more of a silent condition where you may not feel that LDL rising until much later. Whereas cognition, we typically can actually feel and see the symptoms pretty quickly. So let's look at how they are connected. The heart and the brain. I love that little picture. That's like holding hands. Here's a couple just interesting examples. There's something called the sympathetico-adrenal complex. And this is a system where the body constricts blood vessels in response to shocking emotional distress. So imagine you got hit by a car. You're in a terrible car accident. Even if, let's say, you didn't physically get hurt, maybe it from behind, it's just a really scary car accident and messed up your car, but you were physically fine. You, because of the stress involved in that, had a constriction of your blood vessels, and everything, the downstream effect of that is essentially really acute hypertension. If your blood vessels suddenly they used to be this big and now they're like this, the blood has less places to go. So let's say on top of that, you had a little bit of high LDL, nothing that we were too concerned about beforehand, but there were some sticky plaques in there, and suddenly your vessels constrict. Now we could get something like a stroke just because of a traumatic event. And why is that connected to the brain? Because trauma is processed here. So when we have an very high emotional distress and we feel that here, that connects to what is going on in the blood and the cardiovascular system here. Okay, so like more of a physiological response equals a physical response. There's also something called Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, and this is AKA broken heart syndrome. This is where there is a weakening of the pump itself with onset of stress, and this can be a little bit more ongoing than the one above it, where you hear of like a spouse passes away and the spouse that's living and surviving passes away soon after that, because there is a weakening of the blood pump due to very elevated stress. And again, an example of the brain is feeling an emotion so intensely that it translates into a response in the cardiovascular system. Some stats for you are PTSD, chronic anxiety, depression, Parkinson's, bipolar, schizophrenia, Alzheimer's, all what I think most of us would consider brain conditions, right? Cognitive conditions have significantly increased risk of cardiovascular disease. That's what CVD stands for, simply by the nature of having those cognitive conditions. So having a cognitive condition increases your risk of having a cardiovascular condition. PTSD in particular has an almost 30% increased risk of cardiovascular disease, as well as cardiac-related mortality. So you're more likely to die from a cardiac condition if you have PTSD. Vice versa, cardiovascular disease conditions have significantly elevated risk of impaired cognition, impaired white matter damage in the brain, and an increased risk of dementia. So really what most people say is best practice is as soon as you have a diagnosis of one or the other, you should be screened for the other one. So as soon as we have a diagnosis of hypertension, risk of cardiovascular disease, any heart health issue, we should be going to see the neurologist, because one equals the other as far as increased risk, and that's pretty significant risk. Also, 8 out of 10 patients with Alzheimer's have some sort of cardiovascular condition as well. So they really do go hand in hand. While we may not understand all of the ins and outs of it, they are very much two significantly connected organs. And here's some physiology behind it. There's something called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is your communication pathway. So it goes a lot of places. You can see in that picture, like the vagus nerve is all over the place, and it has branches. Like it starts here in the brain and just travels everywhere and communicates to all the rest of our organs. So this is the channel where the heart and the brain get to talk to each other. This is their phone line. This controls our breathing, controls our heart rate, controls our blood pressure. It controls whether we cough, how we eat, whether we drink. So this is all our brain telling us to do certain things and can actually control the rate at which the heart responds. When we feel stress, The immune response is inflammation, right? If anyone has ever taken an inflammatory class with me on anything having to do with inflammation, you know that the immune response is an inflammatory response. When we have inflammation across the body, we have higher risk of other types of conditions, and this is all based on stress. So if you are in fight or flight mode, whether that's because you're stuck in terrible traffic and you're late for an appointment, whether you had an argument with someone, whether you're watching the news and what's going on in the world nonstop, and therefore you're dreaming about it, no matter what your source of stress is, if you have perceived stress, your body goes into fight or flight, and that tells your body, release the immune inflammatory molecules. It is time to get moving here with an inflammatory response because we are stressed. So you may not be physically doing anything. You may not need an inflammatory response in your body because you're not sick or anything, but that whole response is going to happen because you're having a perceived stress in the brain. And all of this is bidirectional. So extreme emotions influence your heart rate, your heart rhythm, and your blood pressure. And vice versa, your heart signals to the nerves that communicate to your and equal mood, attention, stress, and cognition. So if your heart rate goes up, it's really elevating, we're running really fast, we're exercising, or we maybe have hypertension, that's going to tell the brain, I should be stressed right now. And that might lead to, I'm always in kind of a cranky mood. Can't seem to get out of it. I'm kind of in a deep depression. I'm feeling the knobs of my cognition turn down. My memory is suddenly not really working as well. I'm not paying attention as well, all because my heart is doing things. So the question is, what do we do about it? How are we supposed to improve all of these risk factors that are so very connected? And that's such a cool picture, I think, if that's all the nerves that are connecting the brain to the heart. So these 5 things are what we are going to do, because whatever is good for the brain is good for the heart, and whatever is good for the heart is good for the brain. So we're going to go through each of these 5 categories on how we can do things proactively in our lives to address both areas. 1, stop smoking. 2, move your body in very specific ways. 3, eat to minimize inflammation. 4, prioritize stress management and connection to others. And 5 is sleep for recovery. So we're going to go through each one. Stop smoking. I don't have a whole lot to say here other than giving you some stats, is that smoking increases your risk of cardiovascular disease and stroke by 2 to 4 times. Really significant. And smokers have 30% higher risk of dementia and 1.45% higher odds of faster cognitive decline. So that means, let's say you are starting to have some cognitive decline, whether you're just aging or whether you have a condition, that decline is going to move faster, significantly faster for someone who is smoking. So all I have to say here is stop smoking. There's some stats. I don't have like strategies for you. We have stop smoking classes at the hospital if you need more info there. All right, the next section was move your body, and this is where I actually have a lot to say. There's a lot we can do in the body movement arena that helps both heart and brain. So there's 3 different key areas of types of exercise. I'm going to go through each one. Yes, there are other things. There's mobility, there's yoga and dance that kind of fall in the middle of all of these. There's flexibility, but these are kind of the 3 main areas that we know will help with your brain and help with your cardiovascular. So the first section is cardiovascular movement. Okay, this is where our heart rate is going up. The recommendation is 150 to 300 minutes per week of moderate to vigorous activity. What does that mean? About 30 minutes a day, give or take, depending on how vigorous it is. If you're being very, very vigorous, you can dial it back and do a little bit less numbers and less minutes. But ideally, about 30 minutes a day of movement that is bringing your heart rate up. Not to a level where you can't even talk because I'm like so exhausted. That's really high intensity exercise. What I mean is we're able to have a conversation, but I'm taking a little bit longer to have that conversation. I'm breathing a little bit heavier. My heart rate is going up a little bit. We call it zone 2 exercise. This is, instead of a stroll around the park, this is a little bit more of a fitness walk. Okay, so walking, jogging, swimming, spinning or biking, roller skating, skiing. I really don't care what type of exercise is your cardiovascular, as long as it brings your heart rate up. And everyone's baseline is going to be different. So me going for a moderate to vigorous walk is very different than my 75-year-old mom going on a moderate to vigorous walk. Her mod to vigorous is going to be more of a stroll for me. So you have to kind of find your thing, find what brings you joy, find what brings your heart rate up. And it could be a variety. Maybe it's dance today and jogging tomorrow and swimming the next day. What this type of movement does is it improves the size and structure of different areas of our brain. We want big brains. That really is a thing. Like we want our brains to be big. Whenever people are like, oh, watch out, your head's not going to fit through the door. Tell them forget about it. Like we want those big brains that don't fit through the door. The bigger the brain, the more space there is, the more neurons that are firing. We want big size, and we want structure that is really solid, that is able to connect. We want all the synapses to be able to connect when we're thinking and remembering things and learning. So this type of exercise, when they do brain scans during and after exercise, we see better structure within the brain connections and bigger brain spaces. We also see improved blood flow, independent of condition. Whether you have hypertension or not, we have better blood flow during and after a cardio session. And we have less plaque formation. Why could that be? Because we are making those LDLs go where they need to go and not stop and stick, and we're improving the blood flow, so we're pushing them out of the system. So we're having better blood flow, which reduces plaque formation both in the heart areas as well as in the brain. We don't want plaque up here either. That's Alzheimer's risk. So we don't want plaque. We want lots of blood flow. We want big brains. We want hearts that are pumping well. All of that happens when we meet our cardio markers. Resistance training. This is our anything using weights. So that can be handheld weights, that can be a machine, that can be bands, that can be body weight. Maybe you're doing push-ups against a wall, squats with no weights, anything that is putting weight against your muscles. We want at least 2 sessions per week. I prefer 3 for really, really good improvement in all organ systems, but a minimum of 2. Again, you can use any type of equipment you want as long as what you're doing is stressing the muscle. We want that muscle to feel really fatigued by the end of each set, where I probably couldn't do 1 more bicep curl. Done. So if you're just able to do, 50 of these real fast, we need to add weight there or find a different way to work on your bicep. Same thing with glutes, all of your different physical areas. When people in studies do resistance training consistently at a minimum of 2 sessions per week, we see structural and functional improvements in the brain. So again, those structure, the pieces that are supposed to connect better and more effectively. And we have less atrophy. So especially in the aging populations we're gonna see some atrophy in the brain as we get older. That is just a part of getting older. We see less of it and less quickly when we're doing resistance training. We have better executive functioning, so we're reasoning better, we're thinking through things better, rational, we're following a conversation and able to kind of come up with a creative response to it, and we have better memory with resistance training. The big reason for that is every time we contract our muscle, we release growth hormones. Growth hormones are like Miracle-Gro in the brain, so we're able to truly create and connect more synapses and synaptic connections in the brain. We have less fall risk. We have better blood flow, and we release anti-inflammatory immune proteins, so our immune system is better. So at least twice a week. And then we have this third section of movement for brain and heart that's called neuromotor or dual tasking. And this is what we call them brain exercises, but they really do stuff for the heart as well. You want 150 to 300 minutes per week of these as well. And that, again, that's about 30 minutes a day, and they can overlap. Your dual tasking exercise can be cardio or can be resistance. They should be, and that way you're not trying to get hours and hours and hours of fitness in every day. What this is any type of exercise that is both physical and cognitive at the same time. So instead of just standing there and catching a ball, you're jogging in place and you're catching a ball that's being thrown to the right and catching a ball that's being thrown to the left. And maybe you're catching a ball, you don't know where they're going to throw it. You have to decide and react at the same time. So that is dual tasking versus just the catching of the ball. So any sport is dual tasking, whether you're playing pickleball or tennis or soccer, or it doesn't matter what sport it is, because think of all the aspects involved in playing a sport. You are definitely moving your body and having to think through things at the same time. Dance is a fantastic example of dual tasking. This is where you're learning choreography, performing the choreography, and not stepping over your toes while you're bringing your heart rate up. Yoga, same thing, very highly dual task oriented because we're doing balance and poses and moving our body while having to think through the breath work. Tai Chi, same thing. And exergaming, like a Wii Fit. Anybody have those? That is a fantastic example of moving your body and thinking through, like having to connect your hand to the exergame ball that's coming at you. So all of those are examples of dual tasking. There's a lot more that we'll go over in a second. When we see clients doing dual tasking, and this is in study after study on dual tasking exercises, we see a slower progression of cognitive decline in all 4 of those domains that we went over: memory, attention, executive function, and processing speed. And we see it in all populations. So we see that benefit in someone who is an active ager, who's just kind of having normal cognitive decline of aging. We see this benefit of slower progression of decline in those who have cognitive conditions like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease. So across conditions, we're seeing this benefit in the brain. We also see significantly higher endorphins, dopamine, and serotonin. These are our feel-good hormones. And remember back in the first couple of slides, we talked about those feel-good hormones being directly connected to our heart rate and our blood pressure and our resting heart rate and how our cardiovascular system functions. So when we are having these feel-good hormones released from laughing because we tripped over ourselves in dance, or giggling and high-fiving because we played pickleball together, all of those respond with a better cardiovascular outcome as well. We also just have a connection and a laughter element that is, we know, is better for overall heart health. And I just want to note this little thing at the bottom. It says 52 hours of exercise. 52 hours of exercise in a twice per week program is about 12 weeks. So think of a twice per week for 12-week program in older adults. This is done in all kinds of ways, with all kinds of populations. It's kind of the standard setup for research on dual tasking. And that is all it takes to see noticeable improvement in executive function and processing speed that lasts for months afterward. So that's not to say, oh, all you have to do is 12 weeks and then you're done for the rest of your life. Like, you want to keep it up, but how amazing that you do a 12-week program of dual tasking. You're checking off your cardio and your resistance at the same time, and you have cognitive and heart benefits for months after that. So just some other examples of dual tasking. We kind of talked about all of them: yoga, dance, balance, Wii Fit. There's another cool cognitive exergaming program called LudoFit, Ludofit. They're a separate company. I'm not affiliated with them, but theirs is neat because you don't have to have any equipment. You just have to have some sort of screen that has a camera that can see you. And you move with the camera and you're like skiing through the Alps, or you're rowing a boat. And so you're exergaming and you're in the game. It's kind of virtual reality-ish. But you can like play it on your iPad because there's a camera on your iPad, right? There's some cool companies out there that are doing the exergaming concept that you can do at home. So that's just one of them. Down there at the bottom is showing you kind of a balance activity with Blaze Pods. Blaze Pods are something we have at the Wellness Center. They're these like light up discs, and they light up at different times, and your job is to go hit it. Think of it as like whack-a-mole with lights. So again, your processing speed, you're reacting, you're having to hit it hard enough where it turns off while you're physically moving. So that's dual tasking. And that cool computer screen over at the left, that's called a SmartFit. We have a couple of these panels at the Wellness Center too. And this one is a very high-tech version of dual tasking, where you are hitting, punching, kicking, tapping the screen with whatever game happens to be on there while moving. So maybe you're jogging in place, maybe you're doing burpees, like whatever your physical level is, and you have to hit the screen with whatever the game is telling you to do. So lots of really cool, like gamified dual tasking with that obviously is only accessible in certain places like ours that have this technology, but you can see the gamut of being able to do dual tasking at home, to in a community center, to in a higher level like medical fitness center like ours. That you can access it in so many different ways. It doesn't have to be a specialty thing. Okay, so we said no smoking, move your body. The next section for brain and heart health is eat to minimize inflammation. And I'm not going to go too deep into this because this is my topic that I talk about all the time. And we have lots of recordings on the website all about nutrition. But your general caveats, your key points of eating for less inflammation are fiber, protein, and fat. And just to back up for a second, what we want to do with food is minimize as much as we can what goes into our body that our body has to respond in an inflammatory way to, because we don't want inflammation clogging up the arteries and the veins and not getting blood up to the brain. That's the idea. We don't want inflammation in the brain. So what the goal is not to eat perfectly every single day, but to minimize the types of foods that our body is going to say, I better get rid of that too. So fiber helps because fiber helps clean out the system of things like LDL, excessive cholesterol. Fiber helps feed the good bacteria, which then communicates to the heart and the brain that things are good. 25 grams per day minimum. That's about 4 to 5 cups of produce every single day. That's your general bare minimum. If you want to get 40 instead of 25, please do. Most Americans get about 14. They're getting about half of what the daily need is of fiber. And fiber is any plant food. Protein. Protein helps us to build those muscles that we're breaking down in resistance training. It also helps to make sure that all of our organs and blood cells are doing what they should do and not in a deprived state, so that everything can be created. Protein creates things. It creates the synapses and the connections and the hormones. We want enough protein on board to where we're able to do those things. So your protein is more of an equation because everyone's really different, depends on your body type. 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day. Don't want to do the math. For most people in a generally healthy weight range is going to be 80 to 100 grams of protein per day. It's a good starter range for you. And protein is, that can be meat, that can be fish, that can be nuts and seeds, that can be beans, that can be tofu, that can be dairy. Fat is incredibly important because fat helps create the blood cell and the brain cells. So our brain is actually made of fat, and all of our cells are made of cholesterol. So if we are fat insufficient, nothing works. Everything kind of falls apart. So this is another equation for you, 0.6 to 1.5 grams of fat per kilogram of body weight per day. I'm less worried about you knowing your exact range of fat than I am about you getting the healthy fats in it. When you are eating fat, it should be from a plant source or a well-sourced animal. I'd rather you eat avocado than a ton of avocado oil. I'd rather you eat a bunch of olives than a bunch of olive oil, even though olive oil can be very healthy for us. We want the whole food as much as possible because it comes along with fiber and other nutrients. That being said, when we're eating oil, we're cooking with oil, it's a necessity. We want virgin or cold pressed oils. That means it's from a good quality source. And we want to minimize our fats from ruminant animals as much as possible. So that would be your butter and our lard. Not that you can't eat these things, but your kind of go-to fats for cooking should be more of your plant fats in general. And the reason for this is there's less saturation there. The more saturated fat, the more risk of high LDLs we have, which we know is related to that heart health issue. If you can take one thing away from anything I ever teach you on food, it is to minimize the ultra processed foods. You have to think so much less about how much fiber you're getting and my cups of produce and my types of fats. You have to worry so much less about that and the balance of your meal if you are eating things in the green and the yellow column here. So this is our spectrum of ultra processed food. We have completely unprocessed. So that's just a egg, a banana, a piece of chicken, like the food without anything done to it. We also have processed culinary ingredients. So this is things like butter, salt, sugar, olive oil. They're technically a little bit processed from their original source, but we don't have anything else added into them. So they're not super processed and we need them for cooking purposes. Then we have processed foods, which are foods that have been partially cooked and prepped for us. Think bread, think cheese, think canned fish, canned beans, anything that kind of has been slightly prepared for us. But if there's not a whole lot of other stuff in the ingredient list, I don't really consider that even a worry. If you're more able to eat canned beans than cook beans from scratch, and all that's in that canned beans is water, salt, and beans, think of that as an unprocessed food. It's the red column I worry about. The ultra processed foods where the ingredients look like a science experiment. That's how I teach it to my preschoolers. Or we don't know by looking at that food where on earth it came from. Like, what is even in this? What type of food is this by looking at it? Like, when you look at a pizza from Pizza Hut, like, I couldn't even begin to tell you what's in that food. And then I look at the ingredient list and I still don't know what that is. The reason this is dangerous is because when there's a lot of synthetic, fake stuff in a food, our body doesn't know what to do with it, and therefore that inflammatory process responds. So having a piece of pizza here and there, like, not a big deal, but if pizzas all the time, along with Coke, along with chips, along with these kind of frankenfood meals, we're in an inflammatory state all the time, which brings our LDL and our cholesterol levels up, which then makes our brain less able to do its job because it's inflamed. So it's all connected. Ideally, we are having ultra processed foods no more than 20% of the time. Most Americans, it's the opposite. They're eating more like 80% ultra processed and 20% of the other. So again, if we can lean more on real foods or foods that are processed but made of real foods, most of the time, you have to worry so much less about the slide before this. Next section, so we did smoking, no smoking, move our bodies, minimize inflammatory foods. We want to prioritize stress management and social connection to others. We kind of talked about this already on that fight or flight response. If we are running away from a tiger, look at all of these cardiovascular things that happen. Our breath rate goes up, our blood pressure goes up, our heart rate goes up, our blood sugar, our insulin, oxidation and inflammation goes up. We actually age faster in that process. And look what goes down. Our thought processes. This is cognitive. Our creativity, cognitive. Our concentration, cognitive. I'm not paying attention to the colors around me or what the smells are or the exit on the freeway if I am really stressed out. My immune system goes down and my digestive system goes down. So even if I'm eating really well, I'm not absorbing and metabolizing the good nutrients because I'm stressed all the time. And all of the opposite is true when I'm in rest and digest. So this doesn't mean we have to avoid fight or flight. It means that we want breaks from it. We want to constantly be reminding our body, go into rest and digest now, go into rest and digest now. Because if we're always in the left, we get used to it. And then we have these silent kind of increasing risk of cardiovascular and brain health all the time until, 2 decades later, suddenly now I'm hit with a heart condition and early signs of dementia. Some of these stats over on the left are stats of loneliness and isolation. If you are feeling lonely, and this is especially true for our seniors, it's kind of an epidemic right now of loneliness in the United States. You're at a 50% higher risk of developing dementia because of loneliness. And there's a lot to unpack there, but I mean, there's a stress level involved in that. There is that heartbreak involved in that. There's so much there of why we might develop dementia when feeling lonely, but it's a very significant increase. Increased risk of early death in general, 30% increased risk of stroke and cardiovascular disease. So see that connection? We're increased risk of heart disease, increased risk of dementia. Imagine I already have one and now I'm feeling isolated and lonely. Boom, now the risk has gone up a ton. So some strategies to manage acute stress. We're always going to be hit by stress. We live in a world where we will be stressed. So it's not, again, avoid all things that are stressful, say no to everything. It's how do we manage those stressors in the moment or maybe after the moment? And there's lots of different ways, and you pick what works for you in the moment. One is meditation and breath work. Some people are really afraid of meditation and they feel like they fail every time they do it. And so I tell them just start with some easy breath cycles. Exhale longer than you inhale. So that's what this 4-7-8 is. Breathe in for a count of 4, hold for 7, breathe out for 8. Or you could do what's called a box breath, where you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. It takes you 30 seconds to do that 3 times, and the amount of serotonin you get from that and the heart rate reduction you get from that is significant and impressive. I do that whenever I'm about to go speak or go into a meeting I'm feeling nervous about, because I automatically feel more calm when I walk in. And that helps me throughout the meeting to think more clearly, right? To have better cognition whenever I'm presenting. So Just practice with breath work if meditation feels out of reach. You certainly don't have to meditate for 30 minutes at a time in a silent retreat to get benefits of the breath work and the serotonin from that. Yoga and Tai Chi, we talked about that for dual tasking purposes, but from a cognitive and cardiovascular perspective, it stabilizes our mood because it releases something called GABA, which is a hormone that makes us just feel peaceful. It's not like a, yeah, dopamine, I feel great hormone. GABA is like a peace hormone. I feel good. So doing that can really help, and you just can Google on YouTube yoga for 10 minutes and you can do something in your living room. It doesn't have to be a class. Laughter of any kind releases endorphins, which makes us feel confident, which makes us feel connected, which helps with our heart rate, which helps with the expansion of our diaphragm. So our heart has more room and our lungs have more room to do their thing. And it makes us feel happy in our brain. And guess what? Your body does not know the difference between fake and real laughter. You can fake it till you make it. Just start laughing and you'll look like a crazy person in the corner. But if you just start laughing, your body feels the response. And guess what? The other person next to you is going to start laughing too. It's contagious. Music has a low dose dopamine response, which is awesome because dopamine is kind of our addiction hormone. So we don't want a spike of it. We want like a little bit of, oh, this feels so good. I want a little bit more. And we've all had that. If you've gone to a concert of music that you just love, you just don't want them to leave. That's what encores are all about, right? So if you play some music while you're feeling stressed, that can bring you into rest and digest. There's also the physical, a massage or a hug. How many of us have just been so sad and stressed? We're like, I just need a hug. It's because it releases oxytocin from the touch, which is the same thing that massage does. And that makes us feel better in the brain, feel calmer, bring us into rest and digest. The heart and the cardiovascular system is happy too. So everything improves both aspects. It just depends on the moment in time, what you're able to access and what feels good to you. Maybe you don't like Tai Chi, so don't choose that as your option. And then our last bucket to talk about here is sleep. So sleep is very connected and related to stress. If you're not sleeping well, you're going to be chronically stressed, but it's also kind of its own thing by itself. So just some information is while we sleep, we problem solve. That's why there's a phrase that literally people will say, just sleep on it. Tell me in the morning, just sleep on it. Because we are in a calm space when we're sleeping and our brain can kind of process all that decision making and stress and worry. That's what dreams are for, are helping us to regulate emotions and problem solve. So if we're not sleeping well, we still wake up with those unsolved problems and unidentified emotions. We also generate more creativity. Our immune system functions better when we're sleeping. While we're sleeping, we also have waste removal. It's called the glymphatic system. There's literally a fluid called glymph that turns on in the brain and flushes it of icky gunk. That will not turn on when you're awake, ever. So you have to be in certain levels of sleep for your glymph to turn on, and therefore, if we're not sleeping well, we're accumulating gunk, we're accumulating plaque over time in the brain. We have more synaptic connections when we're sleeping, and we have kind of a cellular restructuring of some of the cells that have kind of gone wacky. So when we're sleep deprived, we're more likely to have injury, we're more likely to have insulin resistance, we're more likely to have dementia, and more likely to suffer from just common cold and cardiovascular issues, all from lack of sleep. In fact, poor sleep is a positive predictor of Alzheimer's years before the diagnosis, if it's consistent. And if we can't relate it to something, I think this always kind of scares people. They're like, well, I don't sleep well, but I mean, it doesn't mean necessarily that you have Alzheimer's. If you're not sleeping well because there's a lot of stress going on in your life, or your room isn't set up for good sleeping and there's a lot of light on, like there could be reasons. But if all other things are pretty good and just suddenly we're not sleeping well consistently, it can be a predictor. Also just of MCI, mild cognitive impairment. And this is just an interesting study that I like to tell people about, is that they did a 2-week study of healthy college students who were young, healthy, fine, no issues, for 2 weeks pre-finals. So they were all sleeping for 4 hours a night because they were studying, they were stressed, they were not sleeping. But other than that, they were healthy. And at the end of just 2 weeks of having less than 5 hours of sleep every single night, they all had insulin resistance like that of someone with diabetes in 2 weeks from not sleeping well. Okay, so there's a lot that can happen when we are not paying attention to our sleep. in the heart and the brain. So just some general rules of healthy sleep is sleep in silence and in the dark, much as you possibly can. Turn off the little tiny light of your clock, cover it up, get rid of any light, because that all tells the brain that it might be daytime. Don't eat too much. Don't eat at all, actually, for at least an hour, if not 2 or 3 before bed. No smoking, again, not drinking at least 2 hours before bed. Take a walk, get some fresh air, just get movement throughout your day. Caffeine after noon can impede sleep. Even if you're someone who's like, I can go to sleep after a cup of coffee, no problem. You might not be reaching deep sleep because the caffeine is in your system. Comfortable bed, comfortable temperature. You want it to be slightly cool. You don't want it to be hot or too warm, always slightly cool in your room. Consistency of bed and wake time is huge. Probably the number one thing if you are trying to improve your sleep. If we go to sleep at 9 tonight, 10:30 tomorrow, 11 the night after, 8:30 because I'm really tired the night after that, this is literally what happens when we're jet lagged, when we're going in and out of time zones, and it can impede our body's ability to actually get quality sleep. So try and have your sleep range the same hour. So if you're kind of a 10 p.m. sleeper, 9:30 to 10:30 is your range for sleep every night. Same with waking up, even if it's a weekend. That will be the best impact on your sleep. Try not to look at games, screens because of the light, but also because of the stimulation. If you're, again, watching the news or even just watching a show you love and you're kind of like addicted and binge watching too, you're not going to turn your brain off. You want to keep watching it. So nothing too stimulating an hour before bed. And sleep rituals are really helpful too. Do the same thing to get ready for bed every night because your brain loves that. Your brain loves a good routine. So it will start to learn, oh, we're brushing our teeth now, time to get ready for bed. And all the hormones start shifting without you even totally realizing it. And you start to get ready for sleep. That's why we have routines for little kids, because they thrive on that. Okay, so to summarize, what's good for the heart is good for the brain. Stop smoking. Move your body, cardiovascular 30 minutes every day, resistance training twice a week, dual tasking as much as possible, and it can overlap in the other two. Eat to minimize inflammation, lots of fiber as much as possible, enough protein, healthy fats, and just minimize ultra-processed food. Prioritize stress management and connection. Talk to someone every single day, whether it's on the phone, going to the bank. Make a connection, a social connection to a human every day. And try those things like breath work, like yoga, tai chi, music, laughter. Try those things in the moment to bring yourself into that rest and digest and really focus on your sleep quality. What of those things in that circle that I just showed you on the last slide are maybe not quite happening, and where can we focus there? Before I jump into questions, these are obviously things we do at the Wellness Center. Most of you are very familiar with us, but we have some cool cohorts starting up, some mini series in this next month. We have a strength and motion series. So if the resistance training was intriguing to you and you don't really do any right now, Eric is one of our awesome trainers who leads this twice a week for 6-week group. It always sells out, and it's all focused on learning how to lift weights and do resistance training safely and effectively. We have a new Brain Fit series, also 6 weeks, twice per week, all in the Brain Gym, all doing cognitive dual tasking exercises with our technology. It's our very first time launching this one, so we're actually rolling it out at the 125 rate, and you get 2 trainers. And then I am teaching a new 3-part series on meal prepping and getting kind of a formula for meal prepping if the nutrition piece is what you're focusing on. That will be 3 weeks on Monday starting March 23rd. For some mentors. So would love to see you in those, or really anything else. And I still teach these monthly free webinars all the time. So let me pull up the chat. We have time for questions. Sardines are processed, question mark, Susan. Yes, because they are not raw and they are canned in oil. So there's been a prep process there and a canned sardine, but sardines as ultra processed at all, unless you look at the ingredients and they're packed in like a sugary salty sauce. Like those are out there too. that I would call an ultra processed. But outside of that, sardines are only processed because they've been kind of pre-prepared for us to eat out of the can. But that's where I don't worry about that at all, because it's probably what I would also do if I were to go and catch a bunch of raw sardines. So very good for the brain, a good source of fat. Don't worry about sardines, but do read the ingredient list. Is talking with someone as healthy as texting? This is such a good question. I don't have like a study to say yes or no definitively, but just based on what I know and looking at the research that has been done, I would guesstimate that talking is a healthier option for connecting to someone. Texting is good. If there's a back and forth conversation happening via text, you are indeed connecting. But you're not having an emotional response connection. You're not sure what their tone is when they're texting you back. You might go an hour in between responding and then get back to it. It's not quite the same emotional response as talking to someone in person or on the phone and hearing their voice. And therefore, it's just not going to have as big of a cascade of hormone and cardiovascular and brain impact. Again, I can't like say that definitively, but that would be my big guesstimate. Other questions? Oh, okay. Just popped in. Under sleep, we may have skipped. Do not put working electrical appliances near your head. Can you mention this point, since many folks may place their cell phones on a bedside table at night? Okay. The devices next to your head thing. There's two reasons why we might not want that there. The most acute reason is it pinging, right? Even if you have it on vibrate, if it's lighting up at all or vibrating or making any noises, you will be interrupted in your sleep, for sure. So that's the biggest reason, in my opinion, to not have a cell phone next to you in bed. Then there's the radioactivity that's going on there, which I am not an expert in by any means, but there is that piece of it of having electromagnetic waves next to your head the whole time when you sleep. Now, is that going to acutely determine how I sleep tonight? No, that's more of a long-term impact. The same thing as like microwaving your plastic containers every single day at lunch. It's not right this moment causing a problem, but over time it will. But for sure, any light, ping, vibrate that might happen from that phone while you're sleeping will acutely impact your sleep right that moment, for sure. Sound machines, okay. Yes, with a caveat of what the sound is. Some sound machines have all these different sounds that come with it. And if it's like singing you a song or it's a bit more of an elevated sound, I've heard some crazy like chiming ding dong sounds from sound machines where it's like, that's not going to help me sleep. But if it's really a white noise truly, or there's all these different noises, right? White noise, gray noise, there's a pink noise. That's just sort of this even keel blocking out other sounds tone. This can be really beneficial, and some people sleep actually much better with that. And sometimes it's just blocking out the other noises. Is Costco's Kirkland brand applesauce in a pouch healthy? The only ingredient is apples, nothing added. I'm so glad you put that, because I was like, it's been a long time since I looked at the label of that. So as long as it says just apples, that's what I would call a slightly processed food, that we have cooked the apple and packaged it. Is it as healthy as the whole apple? No, because we've lost the fiber. So that's the downside of processing fruits and vegetables, is that once you've taken it out of its apple crunchy form, we now don't have the fiber. But you're still getting all the good nutrients from the apple. You're just not getting the fiber part of it, so it's a little bit of a higher glycemic product. Does that mean you can't eat it? No, I would certainly rather you have a bunch of applesauce packs that are just made of apples throughout your day than reaching for granola bars high in sugar. But in like the spectrum of healthiest to not, I would say apple is the healthiest, and applesauce or apple pouch made of just apples is behind that, then apple juice, and then like an apple strudel or something. So kind of the spectrum. should we be taking supplements for brain health? Oh, Sherry, such a good question. So in general, I always recommend, unless you have some sort of contraindication because of weird conditions that we're managing or medications, vitamin D3 and omegas are essential. Pretty much everyone for an inflammatory perspective, but inflammation translates to brain health and heart health as we know now. So for sure, a vitamin D3 of 1 to 2,000 IU per day and an omega-3 of about 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams per day. Again, make sure it doesn't contraindicate certain medications you might be on, but for the most part, I say that across the board. The one thing that I really like from a brain health perspective that is different than that is creatine. C-R-E-A-T-I-N-E, creatine. And you want to make sure that it's just creatine because, like all supplements, people can cut it with other stuff. So creatine comes in a powdered form, and you just put just look for creatine or creatine monohydrate in the ingredient list. Shouldn't say anything else. It's tasteless. It dissolves. It's kind of like a nothingness. I put it in my lemon water in the morning. It's been really highly researched to help with resistance training and building muscle at 5 grams per day. And about the past decade, they've done a lot of research on it doing brain health benefit at 10 grams per day. And the reason for this is creatine helps us to create more energy. So our ATP process of creating energy in our cells. So creatine doesn't like make you build muscle. It gives you more energy production ability to add that extra weight, to do those extra reps. That's what's happening. So at 5 grams per day, it kind of helps with the general musculature of the body. At 10 grams per day, what the studies are showing is that is now enough to cross the blood-brain barrier and create more energy in the brain. So now we feel more energized. We have less brain fog. We're able to make more synaptic connections. So 5 to 10 grams per day of creatine. And again, just make sure that doesn't contraindicate anything. The only population I've ever seen that I would be hesitant with creatine is if you have a kidney condition, because you're already kind of not processing creatine enough, like your natural creatine. Everybody else, feel pretty secure in recommending that. Does homemade applesauce from fresh apples lose its fiber? It does. When we cook fruits and vegetables, we break down the fiber. You're going to get more nutrients in a homemade applesauce because we're not high heat processing them like in pouches. So we lose the fiber no matter what, but we keep and preserve a lot of the antioxidants when it's homemade. And it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing to lose the fiber as long as you're getting fiber in other places. So for me, like when I make applesauce, I like to stir it into my oats. So now I have fiber from my oats. I have antioxidants from my applesauce. Wear your hearing aids. Yes, thank you. Hearing loss is such a huge predictor of cognitive decline. A big reason is we just get socially isolated. So it's all connected. So have a hearing check. Also have a cognitive check. We all get colonoscopies, right, around the same age. Go get a cognitive eval. Make sure that you are not having a lot of inflammation that could be potentially fixed before we hit cognitive decline. You can do that. Anyone over the age of 65 should have a standard cognitive eval whether you're having symptoms or not. Is there a brand of creatine I like? I use the brand Naked. They have a great one that's just creatine. It's a big old container that lasts me forever. But there are other brands. Just Ingredients has one too that I like. Are there online brain exercises you recommend? I'm assuming you mean like a program. The one I mentioned earlier today was Ludofit, Ludofit. I really like that one. That is a paid, you pay a subscription for access. I think what else? I mean, there's We Fit. That's a great one. There's also, what is the name of it? There's a gamified one on my phone. Brain. I might have to jog my brain on this one and email it you guys. But there is one where there's like some games on a phone that now I can be spacing out on. I'll email that to you. I'll find it. Are there online brain exercises? Oh, I already read that. I saw the oatmeal article yesterday. Linda, thank you. Yes, I participated in, I do a lot of interviews for articles and whatnot. So there was an oatmeal article. That one was Fox News that talked about the benefits of the fiber in oats. Are cognitive tests done by primary doctors? No, you would be referred to a neurologist for that. But typically over the age of 65, that's going to be a covered benefit. Brain HQ, Bertha, thank you so much. Now I don't have to follow up. Thank you, Bertha. Brain HQ is the program I was thinking of, and they have some assessments, they have some games. Now it's not dual tasking, it's specifically cognitive games. So I kind of like dual tasking because it's cognitive games plus physical. But yeah, I mean, if you're sitting in the airport or like waiting for the doctor and you want to be doing some cognitive stuff, Brain HQ, and they have a free and a paid for version. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad you were here, Bertha. Okay, anything else? Any other questions before we sign off for the day? Oh, one more. AARP has a lot of brain-related games too. Thanks, Carolyn. I actually did not know that. I'm not surprised, but I didn't realize that. A lot of like insurance companies that have fitness programs will also have various cognitive things on their websites. Sometimes it's just a couple, sometimes it's pretty in depth. So it sounds like the AARP has a good one. We'll check it out. The other one that if you are kind of already experiencing cognitive decline would be New Days. New Days is virtual cognitive rehab. So it's Medicare covered appointments with neuropsych and the social worker. And then they have an out-of-pocket piece that if you also want is like an AI conversation robot to do speech and language conversation therapy. So that's a great company, New Days, NEWDAYS, and you can self-refer. If you want to try it, let me know and I will refer you, because if you have a referral code from us, you get 1 month free of the conversation tool. But either way, you get Medicare covered appointments for virtual cognitive rehab, which is fantastic if you actually have a diagnosis of something cognitive already. BrainFit class is full? Oh my gosh. Okay, well, never fear. After we do the pilot, we are going to be launching more. We just want to make sure we work out all the kinks of the program in the pilot. So right now it's just that one that's scheduled. There will be more. In fact, there's going to be a different day. We're going to have a couple new instructors. I think we'll probably have an evening one. So give us March to work out our program kinks, and we will have another one. Wow, I can't believe it's full already. Okay. Peach cups with water. Okay. That would be similar to applesauce. You're going to get a tiny little bit of fiber in there, but they're mostly pretty cooked. So a very similar, like healthiest is the peach itself, then like a peach puree or peach cups, as long as it really is water and not packed in syrup, then packed in syrup, then then peach juice, then packed in syrup, then like a peach dessert. So it's a spectrum. Question. All right, and something I didn't list here was my next free webinar in March is going to be on ultra-processed foods. We're actually going to dig much deeper into this idea of the spectrum of ultra-processed foods in that webinar. And that will be before the meal planning series. So that would be another one to sign up for if nutrition is your jam. Susan, I don't know what you mean by saying magnesium. Are you just suggesting we take magnesium? I'll take it. Okay. Yes. Not everyone needs to take magnesium, but a lot of Americans are very low in it, and that will very much help with sleep, much more so than melatonin. You're welcome. All right, everyone. So come see me in any one of these things, whether it's a series, whether it's a free webinar, whether you're coming to yoga class, but start kind of considering, what are you doing for dual tasking? How are we eating? And keep learning, because that's good for your brain too. So thanks, everyone. Have a great week ahead, and I will see you all soon.